Hey, welcome to the podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Warrior One, how we came to be.
Yeah, a little bit more about the backstory, less, I guess, tips and tricks of things we've learned along the way, but just really the story of how we got to the 3 studios and where we're going in the future. It's actually interesting timing as we're recording this. We're about a week out from the original opening of the studio, which was in 2015, March 15th it was.
So 9 years ago.
9 years ago. We'll kind of start from that point. So Dustin and I, we knew we wanted a business and we loved yoga. It was really something we did every day and we were immersed in that culture. And we wanted to create our own space. So we found a small, tiny little studio, hole in the wall. It was a little underground studio on New Street in Brighton. And it had actually been a studio for about over 100 years.
Yeah, it's one of the oldest yoga studios in Australia. And before it was the modern apartments that are there now, it was this old Victorian place. And I've seen photos. And the woman that started that studio and ran it owned the property, and when she sold it, she put a clause in the property agreement that for the next 100 years, there has to be a yoga, meditation, or a wellness space in there. So it can't be anything but that. Yeah, wow. I remember when we first checked out the space, we're like, nope, too small, won't work. And literally just wrote it off. But then we kept searching and we kept coming back to it. I think we came back 2 more times and explored different options. And in the end, there was something about it that we're like, let's make this work.
Yeah, we were really drawn to it. And it was only a 16 mat studio. So it was very small. It was very humble. From the front, you really couldn't tell, could you, that it was as deep as it was and as really beautiful as it was. And we were lucky in the sense that it was a humble beginning and it only cost us $20,000 to kick off that studio. And that's including everything, which is wild if you've ever opened a business. It's quite hard to start with $20,000.
And yeah, I remember in the early days, we're like, if this turns out to be a very expensive hobby, then let's give it our best shot.
Literally. And I think that's the good thing about starting small, right? Is that you really can test the market. We can test if we like running a business together. And we enjoyed it and we did, luckily. 9 years later, we're still here. And so that first week, which was 9 years ago, pretty much almost to the day, we started off with a free week of yoga just to really build our community. And we were so busy.
Slammed.
I think we had 500 people through the doors of this little mini studio. And it felt like we'd been punched in the face, to put it bluntly. It felt like one of the hardest weeks of our lives because it was physically taxing, it was emotionally taxing, and it was exciting and it was fun, but it was, we were there from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. pretty much 7 days straight.
We'll open a yoga studio. It'll be so chill, so easy. We'll continue working our other jobs. No worries. Quickly learned that it was going to require a lot of attention, energy, and focus. But at the same time, even though it was challenging, it was incredibly rewarding.
It was.
It was super rewarding to see the response from the community, and the feedback from them was just amazing. So we knew we were on the right path.
Yes. Generally, every time we open a studio, we normally do a free week of yoga just to build the community and get people to see what we're offering and give us feedback as well. We really, really, really still to this day love feedback. So if you have any feedback, send it through. And then after that is really when the work began, right? We were there similar to the opening week from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. most days, building the community, talking to walk-in inquiries that were coming across from the Little Ox Cafe across the street. We were really doing everything we could, marketing, very grassroots, going around to local businesses just to build that studio and relying a lot as well on word of mouth, which is a fantastic referral process. And it took a while. It didn't happen overnight, but probably in 18 months, the business really started to build and we started to have the ability to add more classes and add more teachers and have more offerings and really start to build the community.
Yeah, at first it wasn't the way it is now, waitlisted classes and a thriving studio. I remember very much standing there with you being like, is anyone gonna show up? And then being towards the end of the week and praying that no one shows up.
The amount of
So-
times either one person showed up or no one showed up and we just go across to Little Ox and do emails or have a coffee was
A lot.
a lot. A lot.
At first, it could be a little bit discouraging, but I think we were already working so much at that point. It was much needed
Rest.
relief and rest,
Yeah.
and we took full advantage of it. But reflecting and looking back, people that attended those slower classes, they still remind us. They're like, remember when it was just you and me? I didn't think this place was going to survive.
Yeah.
And now they are still diehard members of our community and part of the family. And it's just amazing to realize how far we've come in the last 9 years. It's really special to reflect and to think about that.
It is really nice to reflect. And this morning I was actually journaling out the last 9 years, and it was pretty wow to think how many of those moments that you forget. If anyone's listening that has started a business, you're wearing all the hats. Every single hat that there is, you're wearing it. And you have to do everything. And it is so consuming. And often we'd say like we're in the trenches. And it's very rewarding, as we said, but it's also a lot of hard work. And that's really the beginnings of Warrior One. So we started running retreats fairly quickly into the journey. Probably 6 months in, we started doing Aroha in Thailand because we loved experiential yoga offerings, and that was something we were really passionate about. So we were doing that, plus workshops, plus the classes, plus trying to get the business off the ground as much as possible. And probably around year 2, we started to get comfortable, right? We started to really get into the groove of, cool, we've got enough staff. Dustin doesn't have to teach all the classes. I was still doing majority of the back end of the admin work, but we were getting help, part-time help. And we had the ability to see, I guess, let's find the next step. Let's do another studio. And we really wanted to do teacher trainings.
With retreats, I remember we booked our very first retreat before we even had a studio or a space.
Yes.
We fully committed, booked out the retreat center, reserved it a year in advance, and kind of put that out into the universe and be like, we don't have a studio, we don't have any clients or students yet, but we know this is going to be a thing and we really want to do it. And so we booked the retreat dates, opened a studio, and had a retreat the very first year within a few months of opening. And it was a great success, so much so that this year we're finally going back after a couple of years off from the pandemic, back to Koh Samui where it all started.
So we're doing the same retreats that we did in the first initial year, which is wild, and that's how much we believe in them. We love them. So around year 2, we started looking at studio number 2. How can we grow? And we, in all honesty, we're still learning, right? Like, you learn on the job, and we definitely learned in business along the way. So we were looking at partnering, and at the time we had an amazing member who approached us and had just acquired a beautiful property, and well, actually wasn't that beautiful before we renovated it, and asked us to come to Mordialloc to have a look. And I'd never even heard of Mordialloc. I didn't even know the suburb existed. And we drove out there, and very similar to the initial space, the first New Street studio, we stood there in the Mordialloc space, which was the old Mordi Surf, and it was very run down, wasn't it? And
It was a disaster zone.
it was a disaster
It
zone.
hadn't been occupied for a few years, so it was like commercial building that a business had moved out of and left empty for a few years. So there's piles of dirt and spider webs and everything kind of falling apart, but there is something really special, one about the location, and two, just the vibe and the feeling of the place. The fact that it had been a surf shop since like the
60s.
Since the 60s is pretty special.
And so we stood in there, and it was almost like a resounding yes. It was like, this is happening. This is the next step. This is the space. And it was thankfully big enough to have 2 studios, so we could have permanent class schedule as well as a dedicated teacher training room, which is where we run our teacher trainings. So that was like a huge step in the right direction. And from that first visit to Mordialloc, the ball just rolled, and we were open within 6 months from there.
And Morty is such a special space. The community there is just so welcoming and inclusive, inviting, and they're so thankful. Like, so many people have personally pulled me aside and just been like, thank you for opening here. Like, before this, there was no yoga, no dedicated yoga studio space. So to have a place where people can feel like it's a yoga home and really pour their heart and soul onto the mat, into their practice, is incredibly satisfying as a business owner to watch, but to also have the dedicated training space, to have this space for transformation, and the yoga teacher trainings that happen in there, and the evolution that people go through that process is just amazing to witness, and something I'm incredibly grateful for.
Yes. Yeah. So we opened that space in 2018. So it's just about to turn 5 actually in May, that studio. And that was a huge learning curve because that was our first big build. That was our first full fit out. The other studio was purpose built, like I mentioned. So there wasn't that much to be done to it, thankfully. But this was a huge engineering,
big renovation,
massive renovation to uplift it from what it was from the old Morty surf. But it was very rewarding and we learned a lot, and it still looks gorgeous to this day. So I'm really thankful for that. And with our business partners, they really acted as mentors to us, and I learned so much from that first build, from building perspective. It was our first chance to create a space that we knew people would call their second home, right? Like we really, and that's what we do with the studios. We really want them to feel homely, inviting, calming. You know, a lot of people come in and they're like, I wish I could live here. I'm like, me too. Because they're really, really beautiful spaces, and that was important to get that feel right. You know, we've got, if you haven't been to Morty, you know, one of the features we put in was huge day beds, like they're oversized day beds that you can kind of lay on. And it's just so beautiful to have that kind of space, and after class or before class, you see people chatting, and that's what we wanted, right? We really wanted that community feel.
Yeah, a place where people feel comfortable to just drop in and to be themselves and chat with other people and create that really home at the beach.
Home at the beach, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was 2018. And then from there, things rolled really fast. I think we had like that initial first couple of years that we were kind of easing into it and feeling it. And then 2018 was huge with Morty and running our first YTTs, our trainings. And then we knew Brighton needed an upgrade. It was a gorgeous little space, but it was too small and we were outgrowing it quite quickly. And that was a pain point for us. So we wanted another space, but we wanted somewhere that was close by, that wasn't going to be too hard for our members to move to. And in 2019, the year after Morty, we actually found a space that was, you know, 600 meters up the street on the corner of Martin Street and New Street in Brighton. And it was actually designed to be an apartment. And luckily, the beautiful people at McKim were like, we think it would make a gorgeous yoga studio. And thankfully, that's what it's become. So that fit out was quite amazing because the design of the space, and it was going to be an apartment, the fact that now it's a yoga studio, it does really also have that homely feel that we wanted at Morty. So we went from one build to the next year doing a second huge build. That was a really skeleton shell as well. And we built our dream Brighton studio, and we wanted to kind of keep the grassroots that we had, the humble beginnings, but also upgrade it so people just felt like, oh, this is even a nicer space that they can enter into and practice every day.
So on the second level, you look out onto the skyline and trees. It has like this beautiful, warm womb, or kind of like embryotic feel really held and safe in that space.
Yeah, because of the walls of wood.
Yeah, it's really, really, really nice. And the community there is thriving and very welcoming.
Brighton definitely feels like home. So at the same time, kind of behind the scenes, it was all very secret. Dustin was in talks with Apple about a potential opportunity there. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it was all top secret. Felt like I was being approached by a secret organization like CIA or FBI, and the way they operate. And essentially, they started chatting with me about an opportunity that sounded really exciting. And after learning more, it was something that I couldn't say no to. And it was also super awkward because I couldn't tell anyone about it. And literally only people that had signed an agreement were allowed to know. So all of like 3 people. And I accepted and went over to LA in February 2020, just before the pandemic hit. And that was an extremely interesting and challenging time. But overall, I'm really grateful for my opportunity and what I learned through that process. And ultimately, it just truly made me extremely appreciative of being my own boss, having my own business, and for putting in the hard work that allowed us to have these studios, this place that I feel like home. And after a couple of years of trying that opportunity, things evolved with our business, and I decided that I could not be away from it anymore. And so I came back, and that's been a blessing. I'm super grateful to be back in the business full time, teaching classes, back in the trainings.
I mean, think back to 2019, very end of 2019, the October, November period is when we opened Brighton. And Dustin was back and forth from the US, so he didn't even get to see that build. And I remember like he literally landed back from the US the day we opened the new Brighton studio. So one day we're at the small studio and then the next day we're at the other one. And you like literally like walked in to teach, I think. So it was a really crazy time, and we only had a couple of months to really enjoy the full fruits of that studio until the pandemic hit. And the goal was that we were going to run the small studio as a meditation space, and then the bigger studio was going to be us now, our Vinyasa-based studio. And that was kind of be the goal, is to run the two studios simultaneously, as well as obviously having Morty Alec. The pandemic had other plans for us.
Yeah.
And we ended up obviously closing the doors in March, as did all businesses in Melbourne and mostly around the world. So that was a really challenging year, and that really forced us to go online. It just coincidentally happened to be a really good time for you to be gone, because you left through the pandemic and obviously working with Apple on an online platform. So that worked perfectly, divine timing. But for us, it meant that we obviously had to pivot quite quickly. Dustin we couldn't use because he was under contract with Apple, so we had to use our team and build an online platform, which is thankfully still there to this day. Can you believe it? And people are still on that platform every day using it. You know, whether they can't make it to the studio or they live far away, it's an awesome offering. So there is always a silver lining.
Yeah, I think that was a really smart and quick pivot on your part to see that things might not open soon, because they were saying like 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks, only do 2 weeks. And I think that you noticed that that probably wasn't going to be true. Quickly got online, and not only did it offer an amazing support for the community so that they can continue to their practice, but also for all the teachers and on the other side, that they had something to do and a community to connect with, which at first was like so hard and everyone felt so isolated. So it was really, really a blessing in disguise to be able to transition that way and develop new skills. And I think one thing that I got out of all of that was it made me a better teacher. It made me a little more aware of how lucky we are to have all the tools of in-person classes, and how much of that is stripped back when you go online, and to be able to offer that same connected experience is truly something, takes some practice, and it's really special when it's done right. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. That is a huge benefit, and I think a lot of people's teaching improved from that experience of teaching online, and also thankful that that's not a permanent.
Yeah, we still have that option there.
Yeah.
But the blessing of being able to practice in community in classes is not replicatable.
Yes. As we all know, 2020 was a pretty tough year with opening and closing the studios, and this still baffles me to this day, but for some reason we thought, let's open another studio. So in 2020 we did another build in Mornington, and we actually opened on January the 2nd, 2021, which...
Crazy.
Can't even. To be fair, it wasn't as a bigger build as the other two studios, but also there was trades available at that time, and we were able to get it done and open it. We opened Mornington in 2021, and that was very exciting. That was kind of always on the cards, but it was not on the cards during the pandemic. But the community is thriving, and the teachers there are wonderful, and it's one of those studios that I feel the exhale every time I drive down there every week, and enjoy practicing there and enjoy the community so much. So very, very grateful for that third space that we have. Kind of while that was all happening, 2021 was also an unexpected year of the pandemic, and obviously a big closure in Melbourne for a 5-month period, which we weren't expecting. Definitely not with 3 studios at that point. Well, actually it was 4. And then during 2021, at some point, we did close down the smaller studio just because it wasn't viable to have the 4
And it wasn't in use at all.
It wasn't in use, no. Never did become a meditation studio after all that. So 2021 was a big year with the 3. And then at the end of that year, we had the opportunity to organically kind of go separate ways from our partnership with the couple that we were a partnership with. And the journey was so amazing, and I'm so thankful, even to this day, of everything I've learned and everything we've gone through with them. But it just felt like it was the end of an era, and we went our separate ways. And that was really another catalyst of Dustin returning back into the business from Apple.
Yeah, it was a sign, and it just showed me now was the time to come back. And as Australia opened and the pandemic finished, I moved back last year, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing to be back in studio, back teaching teacher trainings, and yeah, I'm very, very grateful to be here.
Yeah, so 2022, I guess, was our first year of having the 3 and having you back and having no lockdowns, which is always nice. So it's really 3, and we also think about Online Studio as kind of the 4th studio as well, which is lovely. And it was a great year, but I feel like it was really the gateway to what is going to be the best year yet for us. And that's mainly because we have so much opportunity this year to run overseas retreats, which is our first time back since 2019. We've got the opportunity to have you and I back in the business and planning cooler things like a 300 hour. We've got an amazing team of admin people behind the scenes that honestly, the way things run couldn't be run without them, and I'm beyond grateful for that. We have a team of 40 teachers, which always grows as more teachers get developed, and we do more teacher trainings and develop more amazing teachers. And so it just feels exciting. And I was saying to Dustin, like, my goal is really, this business is heart-led. You know, a lot of our decisions that we've talked about in this story today have come because they've felt right. We've stood in the spaces just like we did at Morty or Brighton or, Mornington, and we walked in and felt it. And the spaces that we've walked into that were a potential opportunity to open studios that we never opened because they didn't feel right. So that's always been a thing, right? We've always gone with how it feels and not how it looks on paper.
Yeah, because sometimes something might be financially better, but just doesn't sit well. Or, to do that thing, you have to perhaps compromise your values or morals.
Yeah.
And when you don't do that, and you literally do what always feels right, it leads you someplace special. And I think we're both on this path of following the heart and trusting that over the head. So leading with your heart instead of your head, moving towards love instead of fear. And I think when you run your business in the way, when you lead your life in this way, there can be no wrong. It might take little swerves, but you'll always find the right path. So 2022 was really about rebounding after pandemic years and kind of building back. And that's still happening. I would say that not 100% back from the pandemic. Things aren't all the way back to normal. In fact, every week I see people that I haven't seen for a couple of years, and they're like, it's my first time back in the studio.
Yeah, wow.
People are still easing their way back in. And it was a lot for me. I know it was so hard on so many. So just to know that there is a community of teachers and the student community, the yoga community, that is inviting, that want you to be part of the practice, that want to see you in studio. And there's a really special vibe and feeling that comes with that. I think that's something important to not forget. And that all comes back to this leading from the heart. Yeah. Let your heart lead you back home.
Our intention is to really grow and evolve as individuals and also for our team. And how can we create the best possible experience on the mat for our clients? Like, that's one of our biggest things and something we work on every day. And even though you and I are no longer life partners, but business partners, I still feel we have that great energetic match of how can we grow this together and how can we improve this together as a team?
We always joke that we have the same brain. So we often look at things and have the same thoughts.
Yes.
So it's really good that we have that.
It is good.
And always have someone that has your back, and to do this together, to be by yourself would be impossibly hard. So to have a team, partner and a team behind us that support this is essential and allows us to do what we do.
100%. So we hope you enjoyed the story of the last 9 years. 9 years on the 15th of March. We have to do a celebration.
Warrior One Yoga.
Warrior One Yoga. So thank you for listening.
Thanks for sharing your time and energy with us.